There you go. All right. So,
Hi, James.
hi, Andy.
Good to
So
have you.
we're doing that thing where the recording's just gone and we're going to pretend we've just started up and haven't had a conversation already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're being very false.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
So
being very professional.
in the conversation we were having already, we were talking about some things at the UK Hypnosis Conference, and there were some other things relating to hypnosis and
Yeah,
self-hypnosis and these kind of things. Um, should we start from there then?
yeah.
All right, all right.
How was the UK? Let's make this very current. How was the UK Hypnosis Convention, James?
Okay, yeah, there was some ripples and crinkles, and but generally speaking, there was a lot of interesting stuff going on. And I always loved the UK Hypnosis Conference, uh, and I love it because there's so many good people there and interesting people. And if you take something like hypnosis, and you were to ask the question, "What is hypnosis?" There are many, many ways to answer that question. There are many, many styles of hypnosis, and some even argue about whether some styles are really hypnosis or not. But what I really like about something like the UK Hypnosis Conference is you get people with radically different approaches to hypnosis and radically different understandings of what it is and all of this kind of thing. And you get to sit down and converse with these people. And I think one of the things that's changed for me over the years is that I used to kind of like go there and I'd be pretty sure that I knew what hypnosis was. I had my understanding of it. I had my way of working, and I was pretty grounded in that. And I'd be quite, I wasn't overly interested. This is a terrible thing to say because I had my game down in what other people were doing. So I'd always treat it as a sort of social thing. Some people I really enjoyed and the company often got on with. Um, excuse me. But I think over the last kind of couple of years or so, there's been a big shift for me in that I've sort of thrown out all of my old beliefs about hypnosis, or at least I've put them on the shelf. And I'm very curious about other ways of doing hypnosis. I'm very curious about every conclusion I ever came to that I was got reasonably high levels of certainty around that might actually not be so. Anyhow, so what that means is I've really enjoyed this weekend because I've been able to experience different approaches to hypnosis that are very different from mine
Mhm.
and experience them as a sort of on the receiving end as well, right? This is generally in the spaces, not in the main rooms where the presentations are going on. It's in I love what happens in the lobby and in the corridors and these kind of things more. So I had some really good experiences around being hypnotized, right? So I think being as we were talking about self-hypnosis before,
Yeah.
and there's that old idea from Elman that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. I would I would be open to sharing a couple of particularly interesting experiences of being hypnotized myself in
Yeah.
ways that are nothing like the way I would do hypnosis.
Tell us more.
Right. Okay. So first of all, uh, there's a guy from India called Pradeep Agarwal. Do you know Pradeep at all? Okay, so Pradeep has been into my stuff for years, right? But he's been doing hypnosis way longer than I have. I think he's been doing hypnosis since the 1970s.
Wow.
Okay, but he actually bought my very first hypnosis mastery program when I put that in 2010, the old 10 DVD set that it was back then, hard copy product. And he absolutely loved it. And he's always loved all of my stuff and signed up for all my programs and this kind of thing. So it's really nice to get, somebody who's already in the game like that and so well established being into your stuff. But I didn't really know Pradeep that well because he's obviously over in India and I'm in the UK, and we've had some email exchanges, but never really got deep into things. Anyway, so Pradeep was there and he kind of cornered me and said, James, I really want to show you this approach that I've got, that I've been working up, that I've been developing. And I said, that's great. We'll make a time across the weekend. Now, on Friday, he did his thing on me for the first time, but super quick. And it was before I did my presentation on Friday. And all he did is this. Now, what I'm gonna say here, there'll be some people watching this or listening to this, if they're into hypnosis, that will go, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that approach. And myself, I'm familiar with this approach. But in all honesty, I kind of dismissed it as too simplistic, right? But basically what he did on the Friday night is he said, would you like to be presenting at your absolute best or something like that this evening? And I'm like, well, sure, right? He said, close your eyes then. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go along with this. He said, close your eyes. And he did a super simple thing where he said, there is a part of you that knows. He said, I'm going to speak directly now to your unconscious mind. So that's a classic thing. And I might say a little bit more about that in a minute. I'm going to speak directly to your unconscious mind now. And I'm going to ask you, unconscious mind, now. There is a part of you that has James present or knows how to have James present absolutely flawlessly, and da 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 da. And unconscious mind, please activate that part for James right now. Right? Super simple. There's a part of you that does X. Please activate it right now. Talking direct to the unconscious mind. No trance induction, nothing like that. Just close your eyes. Super, super simple. Too simple in my old view. It's like, well, there's more than that. Now, I went and I did my presentation, and I didn't really think anything of what Pradeep had done as I did the presentation. I was in a good state. I was in flow. But I usually am when I do presentations anyway. I don't have problems clicking into gear. So I was just like, yeah, that's kind of interesting thing. And then the next day, Pradeep said, I want to show you the rest of my process. That was just a little bit. And he took me through a number of experiences. I'm not going to unpack all of them now, but they're all based on the basic ideas are speaking direct to the unconscious mind and doing things with parts, but like in a really stripped back, super simple way, really stripped back, no fat, no extra bits, no fluff, super simple, very, very kind of direct, speaking to the unconscious mind and working with parts. So he's activating resource parts. And he also does a nice little bit of business. He did this really good bit of business of activating a resource part, then going back and he had me pick a memory that still had some negativity around it, and basically asking the part that holds that memory to retain the learnings and then erase the memory and fire the part that creates happiness and well-being, right? And almost running it like a swish, just a couple of times through, like erase and activate new part. And then giving a suggestion to the unconscious mind that any time I want to erase a memory, that process can happen automatically, right? Again, super simple. Now, he took me through a number of these processes, and I was doing them, and I was not being critical, even though I generally don't have a buy-in for that sort of method. And I'll say why in a moment if it's relevant. But so it wasn't really experientially powerful in any way. But he ended the process by doing something that was extraordinarily interesting and really surprised me. This is the first thing that he did that really surprised me. So he basically did this thing. He said, James, close your eyes. And I closed my eyes, and he said something to the effect of, do you believe that you consciously control your physiology, like your heartbeat and your digestion and your blood pressure? Do you believe you consciously control those? I said, no. He said, so that control is in the realm of your unconscious mind or something like this. I'm like, okay, yeah, that seems reasonable, not consciously controlled. So I'm like, yes. And then he said, and now I'm going to speak directly to your unconscious mind. Unconscious mind, please for a time, take control from James of his eyelids. Take control from James of his eyelids. And I can't remember if he got a signal, like a nod or something to let that know that happened, or whether he just went to the next bit. But this was the bit that really like knocked my hat off, was he then went, now, James, go ahead and try to open your eyes. Right now, up until that moment where I tried to open my eyes, here's the thing: I went to open my eyes and they wouldn't open.
Wow.
Now, people listen to this who are into hypnosis might go, well, so what? That's a pretty standard hypnotic thing. But here's why it was interesting for me. Number one, I am not, even though I'm kind of like a hypnotist, I'm not classically a good hypnotic subject in the classic sense, right? I can go into an experience of my eyes being stuck, and I'll do this sort of thing in self-hypnosis, but I'm still aware that I'm choosing to enter and stay in an experience, right? And whenever anybody does that kind of thing with me, I can choose, because also hypnosis is self-hypnosis, I can choose to sort of self-hypnotize myself to go along with their suggestions, but it's always like I'm consciously choosing to self-hypnotize myself to go along with their suggestions. This was very different. It surprised me that my eyes wouldn't open. And for the time that I was in that experience, it was like I couldn't quite find my way out. So that was the surprising thing there. The second thing that was extremely interesting to me about that is my approach to hypnosis is very much about evocation. I'm always saying hypnotic communication is evocation, not information. Whereas the way Pradeep did it, it was very informational. There was not a lot of evocation. There was almost no evocation. It was just almost intellectual frameworks. That was the interesting thing. It's like it was almost a very intellectual language. I've always knocked, it's one of the reasons I've knocked John Grinder as a hypnotist, right? It's because he's like got quite an intellectual way of doing it rather than an evocational way of doing it, right? So that was another surprising thing. The third surprising thing was this. I've always been a great believer that belief is a huge player. And I still do believe that belief is a huge player, right? Beliefs create anticipations, they create all sorts of things. The interesting thing about this is I didn't really have belief or buy-in for the process at all, right? So no belief, no buy-in, no evocation. Weird. Just the whole thing was weird. It just broke a lot of my rules about the factors that ought to be there in order for good hypnosis to happen. I do want to put another thing in here because I don't know about all this. I had actually had 0 hours sleep when this happened, so I've been awake all night. I don't know if that made a difference. But you know, it's kind of really an interesting thing, and I really did, you know, I don't know. I kind of like I'm very intrigued by that super simple stripped down process. And I want to say something about Pradeep as well as a facilitator, because I always look at how people's qualities as a hypnotic facilitator. It was very stripped down. It was kind of like informational, almost intellectual, but I could tell he was very switched on to my responses. He was really paying attention to my responses. So he wasn't just like rattling out some pre shaped script without any attention to me. He was definitely, you know, in the moment, really facilitating well. So it was a good piece of hypnotic facilitation. Now, self-hypnosis, this whole method that Pradeep was running on me comes out of a self-hypnosis process that he runs with himself, right? He was running with himself and he was telling me a lot of the things that he's done with himself. And Pradeep also works with he works with like members of the Indian cricket team. And while we were actually in the conference, he was showing me the live results of somebody who was batting and how many runs they got, who he'd done used his methods with literally the day before to prep them for this match.
Wow.
And showing like, and he's in high demand amongst top sports people in India, and he uses this approach and gets really good results. So it's like a very much a performance. It's like a performance, enhancement approach for things. But very, very interesting approach. Pradeep said to me, he said, I want to show you this because you'll take it and make it better. And honestly, I don't think I will take it and make it better. I'll take it and make it different because everybody fits things to themselves. But he did it so well and so elegantly. I am very, very interested, in this super simple approach. And it's quick. I mean, really quick. I'm not saying it would be an appropriate approach if you're working with a client and somebody came in and they had a lot of, heavy emotional issues or things like that. It might seem a bit too dishonoring of their experience. But on the
If
flip
it gets
side,
results, though.
yes, but I think I don't know. And again, like I think that and I could be wrong about this because I could be wrong about everything. This is one of the things I've come to realize over the years is maybe I don't know anything. But I do have a sense, and maybe this is to do with the demographic that I work with, is that some people really need to feel that they have been seen and their experience has been honored before you just go, we don't know to know your experience. Close your eyes, connect with that part that, do you see what I mean? Like there's a little bit of a pacing and leading, I think. I think that's the case more when you're working with people who are caught in deep anguish and that kind of thing. Um, but here's the thing, I was kind of talking to Alexi about this morning, is a lot of the time, hypnosis work, whether it's self-hypnosis work or working with others, is effective only when somebody is willing to change or let go of their experience, right? And what I mean by that is if somebody's got suffering and anguish and you say to them, would you be willing to let that go? The answer is often like, it depends how people come to you, but for a lot of the people that I work with, the answer is like, what do you mean let it go? Right? It's the equivalent of asking if somebody really hates someone and said, would you be willing to love that person? They go, what do you mean? I couldn't love a terrible piece of crap like that or whatever. They're so caught in the need to be aligned with truth. And they so believe that their experience is about what's actually happening in the world that a lot of people are unwilling to let go of the way they feel about something because they believe the way they feel about it is entirely valid. And the thing itself is the problem. So I think some people they need to move across, and there's a distinction. This comes from the three principles of inside out versus outside in. Do you know this distinction?
Yes, but remind me.
Okay. So the inside out, the outside in paradigm of life is simply that what I experience on the inside is as a result of what's going on around me, right? So if I have bad feelings towards a person who said a certain thing to me, I have the bad feelings because of what they said, right? Or if I if I get angry at the way that person's driving, it's because they are driving in a dangerous way. They are, right? Or if I'm unhappy in my life right now, then I need to look at what changes in my life do I need to make. Oh, I need to move to a different city. I need to do X, whatever. Because my internal feelings and thoughts are entirely valid representations of what's going on in the world around me in my life. That's the outside in paradigm for life. The inside out paradigm of life is my experience comes from within me, right? It is mind made, if you like, or it is made according to my beliefs, my thoughts, this kind of thing. So the outside in paradigm would say, if I hate, I don't know, let's say, if I hate rom-coms, right? There's nothing I could do about that because my response to rom-coms comes from the rom-coms, right? It is because rom-coms are shit and boring and dull and whatever, right? How could I feel anything other than like dislike for rom-coms? So the outside in paradigm is always wedded to the idea that I can only feel one way about that thing. The inside out paradigm says, actually, I could feel any number of ways about that thing, or I could think any number of ways about that thing, and how I think about it and how I feel about it changes it. Right. So I think this is a huge thing when it comes to hypnosis and hypnotic change work, because largely, and I won't say absolutely, and this is true whether we're working with ourselves or other people, we are working with our experience. We are working with shifting our experience. We are not working with changing things in the world. Of course, when we shift our experience, we shift how we show up in the world, and then different results will emerge from a different engagement with the world. But therefore, it's inside out, not outside in, right? So I think different people have different levels of willingness to shift what's on the inside while the outside remains unchanged, right? So let's say somebody's in, I'm working with somebody at the moment who is living with their son, their grown-up son, and their grown-up son has substance abuse issues going on and has angry outbursts and like he beats his dad up and stuff like that. It's not a great life situation. No question about it. I'm not claiming it's a great life situation. But with him as my client, there's nothing I can do about his son's behavior, right? There might be something he can do about his son's behavior, like he could call the police on his son.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not saying he should or shouldn't. That's not my realm to decide that. There are, obviously, and when it comes to coaching, sometimes when I'm coaching people, I will coach them in communication skills and that kind of thing. That's usually business people. But when it comes to sort of like the inner experience, well, what is it that guy needs? Now, part of his experience of this is him losing hope, but feeling hopeless, of feeling trapped, and feeling desperately upset and desperately sad. None of that brings him to him at his best. Now, when you get a situation like that, and you get a client come in like that, if you were to say, okay, I'd like you to close your eyes and ask the part that, right, they're like, what the hell? This is real. What's going on in my life? This is heavy stuff. So I think if, you need to kind of pace and lead from the reality that they're in instead of, jumping across the canyon into this other realm, which is just talking in a very clipped way about parts and things like that. If you are going to do that kind of work, right, you've got to get somebody to cross over. And also, like in a situation like this with this particular client, motivation comes into it because you want to get somebody to that point where they recognize that they have choice in how they are being with the circumstances of their life, right? And they're usually stuck in the idea that I need to change the circumstances of my life. I cannot have greater levels of well-being unless I sort this situation out in the world. Well, what if you had greater levels of well-being beforehand, and those greater levels of well-being helped you sort the situation out? So there's a flip round from outside in to inside out, right? And sometimes it's a good way of testing where someone's at with this is I'll sometimes say to clients, so you've got some unpleasant feelings around this, some upset, and you've got all sorts of thoughts around it. And I think it's fair to say you've not been enjoying those thoughts. And they go, no. I say, so if you could let all of that go and connect into a deeper peace and well-being, whilst everything else in the world remained the same, would you be willing to do that? It's a very interesting question, because some people will go, yes, but they're actually the minority. A lot of people will go, how is that even possible? Right? And some people will go, no, because they're absolutely wedded 100% to the fact that they couldn't feel different about what's going on in that world. Those things really are terrible. And there is only one way to feel about terrible things, and that is to feel terrible. So they're kind of caught up in what I sometimes call the truth trap. I think this is a major thing. A lot of people miss this. If you look at the difference between, well, who does well out of hypnotherapy or possibly any therapies versus those who don't, I think it's this ability to recognize that I bring a way of being to the circumstances of my life, and I can change that way of being, versus the circumstances of my life dictate my way of being. Right? Whether somebody gets that explicitly or implicitly, coming from that inside out place is important for self-hypnosis too, especially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop right now for this week. Hold on. Recording.